Everybody. Welcome to A Better Perspective, a weekly show we've been doing to highlight different perspectives of the same topic because we believe that information changes things and information helps us make better decisions. And we hope that these conversations help you and the organizations you lead and are a part of to make better decisions as well. This evening, we're very excited to be talking with Nathan King. Nathan is an account manager at BBDO New York. If you've ever watched a Super Bowl commercial, he, his team, his organization probably had something to do with that. Um, Actually, we were sitting on the couch watching a basketball game. It was in the playoffs, and he just kind of pops up and goes, "Hey, look, it's my commercial." Um, and so he, some of the work that he's done is and been a part of has probably been in your home. So he keeps his finger, part of his job is to keep his finger on the pulse of markets and media strategies. And today he's going to be talking about branding and advertising, not just from an overall organizational perspective, but more specifically, a church perspective. And so, with that being said, Nathan, thank you so much for coming on this evening.
Yeah, my pleasure. Good to have you. Good to be on here.
So Nathan, let's jump into your perspective. Why don't you talk a little bit about COVID-19 and how it's affecting your industry and the brands that need to advertise?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I work at a fairly large agency. We have several clients in different industries, packaged goods, food and beverage, pharmaceutical, energy, oil and gas, retail. I'm actually on the account side. So advertising agencies are usually split up between the account side or the client side, and then production, creative, strategy, and planning. But I mean, all of that's kind of in the weeds of advertising. But what you don't need to have an advertising degree in is to know that every brand has like a look and feel, right? So what you see a brand advertise on, usually that's consistent for the brand throughout. That ranges from irreverent, comedic. You see insurance companies do that. Geico with the little lizard. You've got mayhem for those different types of things. You have emotional, so think Nike, Walmart. Informative, car brands, with the exception of Matthew McConaughey's in Lincoln. I think he just sits in a car, and that's all that's all the ad is. But the production, all of that is usually the same across the board, though. So you have weeks of planning. The clients come to you, say, we have this amount of money. We want to get this particular action, whether it's we want people to come to our store and purchase something, whether it's brand affinity, whether it's downloading an app and using it, Uber. Nowadays it's Postmates or those different restaurants that you can order from. So the agency, we then go off, we take that and we develop a strategy, we develop creative concepts, and we'll produce. And usually that production is fairly large. You'll have 20 or 30 people at a shoot. You've got the talent, you've got all the cameras rolling. But COVID-19 has been a great equalizer for not only the brand, but for the agencies as well. So we've had, to really just kind of get more granular in how we approach these different problems. It's not only is it making people from around the world adjust to working from home, childcare from home, cooking more from home, all these things, but it's causing agencies like us and the brands that we represent reevaluate their tone, what their communication strategies are, to show themselves as being sincere and a global player. We've had to adjust, and that's the beauty of some of the incredible ads that you've seen lately. Visa launched some really cool stuff. They were supposed to be a really big key player in the Olympics. The Olympics was pushed, and so Visa had to redo a lot of their take existing footage and adjust it to make it work, and that's some really good stuff. Walmart, Uber, Nike, FedEx, CVS, IBM, they've done some really good work around COVID-19, around the response and what they're doing to assist. So all these brands and agencies had to adjust to the pandemic. And so I think, part of what my thinking has been, though you and I have had several conversations, is if the world has had to adjust, if brands have had to adjust, if companies have had to adjust, why shouldn't, the church will definitely have to adjust and change and react and pivot to adjust to COVID-19. So I've tried to kind of put that mind frame of how to communicate to our church and how other churches are communicating. And I think we're succeeding in trying to keep the church more engaged than ever, even though we're kind of locked in four walls and not able to be in a church body or a church building.
Yeah. Yeah, whenever we were talking the other day, you were talking about some of the marketing strategies you guys are using in the response to COVID-19, things like identify the need, messaging, actions. First being that identifying needs. I remember you had sent me something, and it really clicked. Can you talk us through the needs framework you were telling me about?
Sure. So there are different strategies that, as advertising, secular brands, like that we look at as communicators as a whole. But whether or not you're a Fortune 500 business or a church, I think the psychology of it all still fits within how we're communicating. So in psychology, there's a framework called the Maslow's pyramid. And it shows that as how we prioritize our needs. So basically, the effectiveness of marketing is based on how well it speaks to the need of the consumer. So this depends on the person, the product, obviously, and as we're seeing right now, the environment that the consumer finds themselves in. So starting from the top, this is like the self, so morality, creativity, spontaneity, acceptance. Then moving down, self-esteem, confidence, achievement. And then at this bottom of this pyramid is where you're seeing that the shift is happening in COVID-19, because usually these things are inherent to us as Americans, honestly, but usually as, since we're, blessed to all have jobs, most Americans, don't have to worry about where they sleep because they have homes or apartments. So you see love and belonging, friendship, family, intimacy. You see safety and security, health and employment, property, family, and physiological needs. So breathing, food, water, clothing, sleep. So the shift has happened because as consumers more and more, brands are having to now talk about the bottom half of this pyramid, of the needs pyramid, rather than talking about the top. So thinking about most products are, things that we want, not necessarily things that we need. And so these companies that are having to pivot how they communicate. So that's why we're seeing brands that offer physiological needs, food providers, packaged goods, etc., go first and boldly because they're used to being in that space. But brands that may not offer that, think makeup brands and, I'm trying to think of, Disney World, the things that, are extra. These things are things that these companies are a little bit more hesitant to talk about. As the church, we know where we stand in this pyramid. Since Christianity was born, we were designed to be a place for friends and family to fellowship, to feel safe, to worship God in an intimate setting. We also follow the example that the church in Acts was, we're helping the poor, we're helping the homeless, we're helping the widows. That's what the church is designed ultimately to do. And the beauty of the state of the church that we're finding ourselves in the coronavirus is that we should be the most suited right now to react, because our original and purpose was to help our communities stay safe. So our community activities, yes, they're normally organized within a church building. We, have events, we have things that we're doing, but I think what's happening right now is, we're a little shell shocked because we're not used to having to do that on our own.
Yeah.
We're used to doing it as part of a group. And so I think it's taken us a little, at the church as a whole, it's taken us a little time to adjust and to react. But I'm 100%, I'm starting to see it, as churches are getting used to, doing their Facebook Lives and streaming their services. And now they can shift away because they know how to do that now. Now they can focus on, okay, how are we going to reach our community? How are we going to communicate that we're here for people in a time when we're in four walls and not with, the rest of the church group. So I think there's ways that we can do that with our neighbors, our families, our friends, and still maintain 6 feet of social distancing.
That's right.
So there are some known needs that we know that we can address with the people that are in our church. There's a whole list of needs that we look at a communication BBDO standpoint. Connection. People are wanting to feel like they're connected to other people. Productivity, learning, exercise, and well-being. That's why you're seeing all of these influencers that are doing these exercise classes. I have yet to do one, so that's probably why I'm going to gain 20 pounds at the end of this thing. Entertainment, home maintenance and improvement. These are needs that are just natural that people are having right now. So Disney, released Frozen 2 to the love and endearment of parents everywhere.
Yes, we watched it.
They released
times.
it early.
Yeah.
So that was an entertainment need for parents mainly, but for the kids as well because they were stuck in the house. So from a church standpoint, we can take a few of these. Connection, people needing social interaction. They're used to on once, twice, 3 times a week, being physically with their community, their church. Learning, having more time on their hands to learn, to read the Bible, to read books that they probably wouldn't have. So some things that, we've done here at WC, and I think there's some great examples of churches throughout the world, but America that, we've, done Zoom calls, at weekly, men, women, and the youth. And then, like Zoom lobbies, I've seen that we did it and I've seen other churches do it. Those are just opportunities to help with the need of connection, that people are seeing each other's face. They're talking with people that it's not their wife, it's not their kids. They're interacting with other people. We talk about our week. We talk about prayer requests that we have, what we've been watching and reading, and then we pray with each other. Again, someone different than who you're quarantined with. And I think that's really powerful because we are addressing a need that we're seeing. So I think that's what the church can help with. Learning, more people are likely to engage with content because we have time throughout the week. So we can give them content, we can take them through a reading program. I think there's a bunch of Bible apps that you can share, connect, like the men of our church, we can connect them with a reading program. So that way we're all reading the same things and we can talk about it during our call, but we want to learn because we have time. Give the parents Sunday school lessons, that they can teach their kids because it's something that, they can do in their spare time, but it's also, learning, giving these kids something to learn during this whole process. So those are just a few examples, but it's all about addressing a need. So brands are doing that. They're addressing, they're bundling Netflix with, other programs they have. They're releasing Frozen 2 early. The church can do it just as easily, addressing the needs that our congregations have, that our neighbors and our friends have, and seeing, like, as Christians, what can we do to address the needs that we have.
That's so good. That's so good. Yeah, and churches have been very, very successful at that. And it's part of the reason why churches are thriving right now in the middle of the pandemic. It's pretty great.
Right.
It's so interesting how it really doesn't matter what time period you look back in history. Anytime there was a pandemic or there was a worldwide issue or something that comes against life in general, the church has always just kind of thrived in that because it was created to. That's so good. Now, the second thing that you kind of mentioned to me was communication and how brands in general avoid pitfalls of piling on the conversations without value. And what should communication sound like for churches and for businesses when they're in the middle of a crisis? Because nobody wants to sound tone deaf in the middle of a crisis.
Absolutely. And I think for them, I haven't really seen, because you hate to see it, of a brand that does the wrong thing. I think the one thing I was waiting for was, every year during April Fools, you have these companies that do these really crazy out there April Fool's Day stunts. I was waiting to see one backfire, because especially now, it's so easy to say like, oh, we're gonna lighten the mood, and then they just ruin it. But I haven't seen that, because I think a lot of people are saying, okay, we got to be really careful about what we say and how we say it, because there is in our communications, there is a tendency that we can mess this up. And especially nowadays with Twitter and social media, if you mess up, you're done for. So you got to be really careful. For me, I think the thing to just make sure it's really important as we're talking about this is that when you're talking about brands and their communication, and the church and their communications, we've got to understand that those two things have to remain separate. We can't treat the church like a brand of toilet paper, right? There's just completely different, because people are going to put those at different levels. So brands have an offering that they purchase. That's okay. But at the end of the day, we have to realize that that's a brand, that we purchase their product. Luckily for us, we don't have to buy a move of God. We don't have to have a subscription service for the joy of opening the Bible and getting something from God. Those are gifts for us, for the church and the people that are filled with God's Spirit. Like, we don't have to buy that. And so the church, the way we address our communication should mimic that, because we're not selling anything.
Right.
We're giving something. We're giving something to people.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the biggest key for churches and for Christians in general is, whenever we're talking to other people about what we have and what we're offering, it can never sound like a sales pitch. It needs to be genuine. It needs to be what it was intended to be, as a free gift that we're trying to help as many people through their needs that we just talked about as possible. There are a lot of things that brands have to be careful communicating. You can't ignore the problem. There's a problem that's obvious. And so I think from the church, we can't come across as tone deaf. Like, that's a universal thing. So there's a couple of things, knowing our role as the church, knowing as our role as Christians. So this goes back to understanding what we're offering. So as a church, we should always promote positivity and helpful information. I think that's hopefully a given. Philippians 4:8, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things of good report, think on these things. I would say in the 21st century, post these things, do a Facebook Live on these things, because,
Yeah.
and this is even beyond the church, this is, I think, as Christians, being really careful that the brand that we're putting off as Christians matches that of the church, but also is positive. It's not negative. We're not, trying to bring people down, but we're trying to lift people up. So that's knowing your role, not only as a church, but as Christians, I think is really important. And brands have to, obviously that's a big one for brands. Always be reachable. The best way to build trust with anyone, neighbors, friends, family, is to be available. You see the best way to get in touch with airlines is to tweet and say, at American Airlines, I just had the worst possible experience with you, and then 5 minutes later you'll get, I'm so sorry, what can we do to rectify that? Hopefully that's not the type of communication that we'll have as the church, but I was thinking about this, what can you imagine that it's the prodigal son when he was in the pig pen, And he's like, you know what, after all this time, I'm gonna head back home. And he like crawls home. I see the picture of him like on his hands and knees just crawling home, and he passes that last hill, and his dad like moved and he wasn't there anymore. Like I think in the times like these, like the worst possible thing is that for the person that you've been praying for your neighbor that you've been inviting for 5 years, now is the time when they finally have a chance to come back, to come to church virtually, and they try to reach out to you and you're nowhere to be found. So always be reachable, whether on Facebook, Twitter, as a church, on your Facebook pages, on your Twitter pages, on your email, however, whatever your setup is. And as Christians, the people that you've been reaching out to, don't stop now. Like now is when you have the best chance to reach people and tell them about this great thing. Yeah. Being calm. So don't panic, turn on the news and you get a sense of, panic all the time. That's the news. So you'll see brands that are going the complete opposite direction. They're really positive. They're saying, like we're really thankful for everything that's been done. We're going to get through this together. They're calm and they're collected. And as Christians, we know God is in control, right? So we should be calm in our communication. We should be calm in the way that we talk to people. And for the church, the church isn't going anywhere. We're built on a firm foundation. The Bible says the gates of hell cannot prevail against it. And so you see all this news about, the government being anti-church. Don't panic. Be calm. Be calm about this. We'll get through this. The church has endured much worse than this, and we'll get through it. So be calm. And the last one on this, I think, is lightening the mood. Find a little humor in all of this. So there's a balance. As I mentioned, you didn't see hardly any companies that went overboard on April Fools. A lot of companies that usually are a little bit irreverent, humorous, they found a balance here. But I think there are some ways that, companies have talked about, toilet paper shortages, or they've shown videos of puppies, and they've tried to lighten the mood without crossing the line. I love being lighthearted. I'm cheesy and punny, and I find it hard to believe that Jesus didn't crack some jokes with the disciples. So I don't think we should be, super deadpan all the time. So I think there's a balance. There's been some really funny from our church, funny pictures and memes that people have posted. And so I love that. And I think we shouldn't take ourselves too seriously, especially in a time like this. Pastor Hadabal in Cooper City had this really awesome video that he posted of like him doing all of the roles of the church. He was at the visitors booth. He was vacuuming. He was, running the camera. He was preaching. He was everything. It was this really lighthearted video. And the point of it was, church is not church without you in it. And like it was a perfect balance. So as across the board, if we can just be a little lighthearted and not take ourselves so seriously, I think we can't go wrong with that. And I think in the long run, we'll see that if we're lighthearted and we're following all these things, being a little bit humorous, lighthearted, or calm, or reachable, I think at the end of this, when we finally come back and to be together again, it's just going to build a stronger culture in our church that people can lean on.
Absolutely. And thirdly, you were talking to me about acts. That's not the book, actions. What are some acts or principles that churches can do to stay connected and build bridges between their services and people's needs and mindsets?
Yeah. So first of all, actions speak louder than words, right? Yep. So you can post on Facebook all the time. You can have this incredible communication strategy, but if you don't back that up with tangible things, people are going to see right through that. And that's a biblical principle. Is you've got to back up what you're preaching and what you're saying with the actual action. So this action is louder than words. Companies or brands are doing this, right? They're changing their factories to produce hand sanitizer, to produce face masks, to produce. I saw Louis Vuitton in France, Budweiser, Anheuser-Busch is doing hand sanitizer. It's everywhere that people are saying, you know what, like it's one thing for us to say that, we're supporting people and we're doing our best, but like what can we actually do? And so they're putting their resources, their capital, and their people, they're putting that into helping the problem. So as Christians and as churches, we have to back up what we're telling people with actions. So that goes across a lot of different areas. So be helpful to people. So, I mean, there's a couple of different ways that I've seen, if you can, send a meal to the single parent of 3 in your church, right? Like, because that's a need, you're being helpful. That's an action that you can do. It's as easy as calling a medical worker or another essential worker and just saying, look, I know you're out there. Like I'm staying at home, I'm safe, but you're having to go to work every day. So I'm going to pray. Let me pray for you as you go out today. Or I know you have the 12 a.m. to 7 a.m. shift. I don't know if that's an actual shift, but we're gonna stay up and pray for you today. We're gonna have a prayer chain. There's a lot of things that I think you can do, but that is an action. It's not just a text that says, "Hey, thinking of you, praying for you." You're actually saying like we're praying for you. Being thankful is an action. So we know that there are a ton of people that are keeping us healthy, fed, happy, sane. Doesn't hurt to show that gratitude, whether that's on Facebook, social media, in our live stream, or just telling them, right? You're being thankful and you're showing that as an action. So that includes people in the church, the community, your family. So showing some outward thanks is a very small way that we can stay, that we can have an action experience.
That's awesome.
You pause it? Yeah.
No, I'm okay.
I got one more.
Yeah, go for it. I want to hear it.
So more importantly, give thanks to God. I know that's a novel idea. But the lepers in the Bible in the New Testament, the reason why they stayed clean was because a few of them actually went back and told Jesus, thank you for healing them. So I think, the big thing that we can't forget is that, yes, it's crazy out in our world, but we've got to be thankful to God that we have what we have. For me, I'm thankful I still have a job. For me, I'm thankful that I live in, I still have an apartment, that I have food, that I have my necessities and my needs met. There are a lot of people that don't have that. So I'm thankful for that, and I want to make sure that the world knows that I'm thankful. There's not like I on several calls, and when I talk to my clients, when I talk to my coworkers, and the question's always like, "How you doing?" How are you getting through? I'm always like, I'm blessed because I'm just so thankful that I've got what I've got. So being thankful is a way that as Christians, as a church, we can show an action. And then finally, and I think you'll find this one probably the most relatable, is invent new traditions. So that's doing new things that we're not used to or comfortable with. And I think that for me is, for Westchester Church, is what we're finding out, during all of this, is that we would have never have tried some things if we would have still kept to our normally scheduled program. But these new traditions let you know about what your church is capable of, what people are wanting to do and be involved of. They're seeing, the church is seeing some cool stuff, and that is going to carry into it's going to carry into when this is all over. And again, it's going to build culture. It's going to build some new traditions that we would have never have had if this never would have happened. So again, I'm thankful for that as a silver lining to all of this, even though it's been extremely stressful.
Absolutely. Well, Nathan, thanks so much for your time this evening. And at the bottom in the comments, I'll give you those 3 things that we kind of discussed: the identifying needs, messaging, and actions. And so, Nathan, thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, of course.
And, if anyone has any questions for Nathan, you can go ahead and stick them in the comments, and he will reach out to you and answer your questions. And thank you all for joining on this evening. I hope that you have a great week, and hopefully some of this information will help you have a better week. I love that word, better. But thanks so much again, and God bless. Have a great week. Bye, guys.